never forget the time Final Fantasy IX was coming out. My family grew up on the series, extensively playing the medieval games of old, along with the drastic modern take of the series with 7 and 8. Marketing for this game communicated a return to the roots in terms of visual style and setting, which I was ecstatic for. I still remember first seeing this image in the manual, a thief-looking character armed with a short blade, seemingly protecting a girl. Instantly reminded of the Amano art of the classics, like when I would study the manual of Final Fantasy VI. My anticipation for the next adventure in the world of Final Fantasy was one of the most memorable in my life. Since most people in North America began with the immense popularity of Final Fantasy VII, FF9's return to roots was actually initially seen as a departure from familiarity, sinking this game into the shadows for many years. But who would have known that it would eventually conquer expectations and be considered by many to be the best Final Fantasy game of all time? I've always loved its mission to breathe renewed life into the classics, reminding everyone that Final Fantasy isn't defined by a single style or formula that could have been perceived after 7 and 8. Final Fantasy IX not only reminded me of the spirit of the others, but also the heart of individuality. Most of you watching this already love this game, and you're not alone. This is my love letter to one of the dearest memories in my life as a Final Fantasy fan. FF9's lore can be hard to understand, but I do think it enhances the main game's story from the get-go. At the beginning and center of every world are crystals, the source of all living things. All life and memories are born from them, and souls return to them upon death. One of these worlds, Terra, prolonged its lifespan by mastering and consuming other planets along with their crystals, thus giving eternal life to its inhabitants. This plan did not last. The planet and its crystal entered a weakened state. In a desperate act for survival, the Terrans created a powerful android named Garland to enforce a cycle of souls with a new planet named Gaia. This plan ended up being disastrous due to Gaia's overwhelming will to live. Terra's cycle of galactic tyranny had seemingly reached its end. Unable to control this world Gaia. To weaken this resistant planet, Garland created Angels of Death to purge Gaia's civilizations into war and chaos, with hope that eventually, the cycle of souls could be accomplished. The first Angel of Death, Kuja, serves as the main antagonist of Final Fantasy IX. A villain so unpredictably evil and self-centered, Garland had to quickly create the other. It doesn't take long to realize that the game is beautifully centered around life, death, existence, and memory. At first glance, FF9 comes off cartoonish, but I can't believe how thematically competent its execution is. When death is made known, it is quite dark, but when life is presented, it resonates with you. The lore is shrouded in darkness, but it is the brilliantly written characters that truly shine in this world. The battle theme that you currently hear instantly became my favorite. The opening bass line in the first 6 Final Fantasy battle themes was sadly removed from the normal battle themes of 7 and 8, but it made its triumphant return in Final Fantasy IX. The battle system itself follows the active time battle system that began in FF4. What you'll also see from FF4 are the log-to-job classes for each respective character. Zidane is the game's thief, Steiner is the knight, Vivi is the black mage of classic design. Dagger and Aiko both serve as white mages and summoners. Amarant is the monk ninja. Freya is the dragoon. And Quina is the blue mage, my favorite mage class in the series. You'll quickly realize that FF9's battle system went for a more theatric approach than its predecessors, taking much more time to build into each sequence and elaborating on the battle's visuals and tempo. This is typically why FF9 is accused of having the slowest battle system in the series, but if you like slow, then you're good. FF9 pays close attention to mechanics making sense within the game's story context. This can make certain aspects better than initially considered, such as the highly controversial trance system, which is this game's version of limit breaks. FF9's shining gameplay element, though, is the abilities system. This is how the game's character progression is handled. Each piece of equipment in the game is unique, and it will teach certain abilities or traits to each character. You'll also see in their hidden description that you can obtain some stat boosts at level up, or even elemental immunities from equipped armor, and negative status effect attacks from equipped weapons. I am a huge collector of items and equipment in these games, so Final Fantasy IX offers a lot to me with this system, encouraging the player to keep everything they acquire. Mastering every ability is addicting, and even takes precedence over optimal equipment in each playthrough. I don't think this system has as much replay value for multiple playthroughs as other systems in the series, but it is bound to satisfy any player on your first run. That being said, I think it's one of the best progression systems, proving that simplicity will never be outdated. When it comes to music within the Final Fantasy series, you know you're in for a treat. FF9 is a soundtrack that even if you disliked most of the songs, there will be at least one that will touch your heart so much that you'll feel like you just listened to the greatest video game soundtrack ever made. Some of these tracks may include Rose of May, Melodies of Life, You're Not Alone, and several others. I do want to point out that since FF9 was developed to be a tribute to the older Final Fantasy games, you'll find several tracks or Easter eggs that drive this home. A few tracks are even taken directly from those games and fully redone for this one. You'll hear Mount Gulag from Final Fantasy I, Pandemonium from Final Fantasy II, and even Let Me Know the Truth from Final Fantasy III, which I didn't even realize was there for many years. Speaking of Easter eggs, there are so many hidden homages to the series contained in Final Fantasy IX. There are way too many to name, but I at least wanted to point out the ones that have stuck out to me over the years. Obviously, the Elemental Guardians are the 4 elemental fiends from the original Final Fantasy. Truly great moment. The story that you recite with Rama is actually an event in Final Fantasy II with that game's character Joseph. And I've noticed that Dagger is a nice mix between FF5's Lena and Ferris. She's the princess that wants to leave the kingdom to seek adventures with the fun-loving protagonist, and she was separated from her family through a sea storm, igniting many questions of her true origin. Can't forget the Warring Triad statues from Final Fantasy VI. Fighting a behemoth in a cage from FF2, and finding a hidden merchant behind a waterfall, also from FF2. There are so many of these instances, and I've appreciated them more and more as time has gone on. Even with all of the throwbacks, Final Fantasy IX does enough on its own to stand out as one of the more unique entries in the series. You can tell that each location was created straight from the heart. The Dark City of Treno is one of my favorites in the series, giving the player lots to do, and plenty of interesting people to run into. Even the world map, or the world itself, just feels so authentic. I think this is a strength overall for the franchise, but FF9 is just so full of vibrant fantasy and wonder, as if straight from a fairy tale. I am a side quest and completionist hound, and FF9 is an optional content carnival. I'd say it also probably has the most missable items and side quests of the main series. First, there's Jump Rope. Glad that's out of the way. Mognet, which is Gaia's version of the Postal Service. Quiz Time with the Ragtime Mouse. Racing with Hippol. Shuffling with the Nero Brothers. Pleasing the friendly enemies. Collecting the Stelazio, a personal favorite of mine. Blackjack. Chasing frogs with Quina. And you have to get Mr. Morit his coffee. That's an absolute must. If you obtain almost every treasure in the game, you can visit a secret area called Daguerreo, where you'll have a silly encounter with this guy, who turns out to be the legendary Gilgamesh. Speaking of, if you hurry to the end of the game in under 12 hours, then you'll beat Gilgamesh to the chase to claim the most powerful weapon in the game, Excalibur II. This thing is awesome, but it sucks to get. You'll be able to find tons of powerful equipment in the game, mainly through the Chocobo Hot and Cold minigame, which is essentially a treasure hunt spread across the entire world of Gaia. The more treasure you find, the more powerful your Chocobo gets. All of the Chocobo Paradise, Forest, and Lagoon areas are really cool, so I'd recommend this quest even just for that. After the success of Final Fantasy VIII's card game, FF9 had to try its hand at one too, right? This minigame is called Tetramaster, and it took me a long time to appreciate it. Once you get the hang of it, it's almost addicting. The best challenge is going to the final dungeon to play the invisible players. They also have the best cards. It's funny that this card game was eventually introduced in the world of Final Fantasy XI, while FF8's Triple Triad came to the world of Final Fantasy XIV. If we're talking about side content, I have to mention the optional bosses. Even though there's only one true super boss in Final Fantasy IX, there are 4 optional in total. Quail, Tantarian, which is a massive throwback to FF5's incredible Library of the Ancients. Hades, who was actually originally intended to be the final boss of the game. And Ozma, the insane super boss. I still think it's one of the toughest super bosses in the series, and quite legendary. As you can see from these bosses, the monster design in Final Fantasy IX is pretty diverse. I think some of the most diverse designs you'll find in the series. You'll see the cartoonish design in many bosses and creatures, but then others are just incredibly dark and resonant. I think the Hades fight, which I mentioned earlier, is one of the most terrifying designs in the series. Both the silly and macabre designs work together well to give Final Fantasy IX such rich aesthetic flavor. I love the Malboro, the Behemoth, Catoblepus, Tonberry. I only wish I felt the same about the Iron Giant design. It's my favorite FF monster in the series, so I do have very high standards for it. Overall though, FF9 is visually breathtaking. I recently told told the story of Final Fantasy IX as a bedtime story to my nieces and nephews, telling the adventures of Zidane and his 7 friends, fighting monsters, saving the world, laughing and crying together. What touched my heart was to hear my nieces and nephews constantly wanting to know more about the characters. As interested and excited as I was first playing the game in the year 2000. It's not surprising though. I want to say this. As much as I love the characters in all the games in the series, Final Fantasy IX probably has the most endearing cast you will ever see in a video game, period. Each character is not only visually unique, but each was given strict detail for meaningful character arcs. This is why I love the active time event system so much. It's a perfect way to pace the story and plot, while also building each character's arc at the same time. While the game's predecessor focused primarily on the arc of the main protagonist, which I thought was incredibly well done, Final Fantasy IX presented relatable, flawed heroes that anyone would fall in love with. Freya has always been my favorite character in the game. To have a loved one go missing would be one of the most devastating experiences. I can't imagine the mental torment that would cause. The Gazamalut Grotto and the attack on her kingdom, Burmecia, is actually my favorite part of the game. Dagger, or Sarah, is the next in line to be Queen of Alexandria. Instead of basking in wealth and the material comforts of life, seeks adventure and answers to life's most meaningful questions. Steiner is the loyal knight of Alexandria, as obedient and protective as they come. If I had a dog, I would want it to be just like Steiner. Vivi is the fan favorite of the game, and to be honest, I completely understand why. Nothing about Vivi's appearance is intimidating. A boy who wouldn't hurt a fly, but is forced to see others just like him being demolished like insects before his very eyes. This leads to some of the most thought-provoking and philosophical content within the game, especially his moment at the Black Mage Cemetery. Aiko is 6. 6 years old, and she has the hots for Zidane. Definitely one of the more comical characters. Speaking of, there's Quina. Quina is hilarious. He or she would eat anything, and I really do laugh every time I see he or she make an analogy about food in every serious situation. The nieces and nephews loved Quina too. Lots of laughs. Amarant is the cool guy nobody would ever want to mess with. His arc has grown on me. After realizing that trying to dominate others is wrong, he has an incredible moment chastising the Fire Guardian Merilith for bearing the same attitude. Also one of my favorite parts of the game. Then, there's Zidane, the main protagonist. You took every single one of these other characters and helped them see that life is precious, that they're worth something, that adventure is right at your fingertips, that everyone is unique in their own way. And you taught me to see the good in everyone, no matter what. I relate a lot with Zidane. His mindset is one I've tried to adapt with the Final Fantasy series. I choose to see and focus on the good in each game, and I think that's a key to life's greatest joys. One of the most powerful character moments comes when, up to this point, Zidane has been the comforter and voice of optimism for each of the characters' struggles. When the party reaches Terra, Garland tells Zidane the truth that he is indeed an angel of death created to wreak havoc on Gaia. Zidane has an identity crisis. A powerful lesson unfolds. Not only is it important to help your friends in need, let your friends be there for you when you inevitably need it. Therefore, you're never alone. The end is nearing. After some epic battles against dragons, Garland, and Kuja himself, Kuja has had enough of taking orders, kills Garland, and destroys the entire planet of Terra, thus single-handedly eliminating the purpose of his creation. This is insane, but it perfectly leads us to the game's final dungeon, Memoria. Memoria is a dungeon created from the characters' memories along with the memories of the planet. I think this is a beautiful throwback to Final Fantasy V's interdimensional rift, revisiting previously visited areas consumed by the void. Each room is completely different and the visuals are fantastic. There are no branching paths. It's actually the most linear final dungeon of the series, but its breathtaking visuals, music, and nostalgia completely distract from this. Other than FF5's final dungeon throwback, it's very evident that the original Final Fantasy is a vital inspiration, fighting the fiends of chaos in seemingly random battle fashion, just like in the 1987 classic. Fight classic FF monsters such as the Iron Giant, Chimera, and Behemoth. Play some cards with the Invisible Men. Visit Hades' shop after defeating him. And of course you can collect some of the best equipment in the game. My favorites being Kane's Lance from FF4, the Excalibur 2, and even the Masamune and Genji gear, a must-have trope paying tribute to the final dungeons of the classics. Memoria isn't just a nostalgia trip. What might be my favorite thing about it is that it is also a history lesson, diving into the story of Gaia and Terra, even since its creations. The storyteller being Garland himself, speaking directly to Zidane. Witness it all, the lore being burned into your memory, feeling the tension of what's at stake. This path can only lead to one place, the beginning, the crystal. The final boss gauntlet starts with Death Guys, Kuja's pet, then to trance Kuja himself. And when you would think he is the final boss, there are tons of theories about who Necron really is. All that truly matters, though, is that the will to live is that powerful. Have you ever wondered why these characters are so beloved? Why this game was initially underappreciated but eventually rose to greatness? I find it ironic that one of the last messages of Final Fantasy IX is how powerful the will to live is. This game was essentially non-existent for years, but its will to live was overbearing. As much as I've always loved this game as being a love letter to the old style, I've realized that what I love the most about it is what makes it stand out from the other games. This is what has made it its own identity, a timeless classic. A cast that everyone has fallen in love with. Isn't it interesting that the very characters we see as perfect, each had internal flaws and struggles to overcome? So why do we love them so much? I think it's because we all see the flaws within ourselves, the things we wish we could change, but that's part of what makes us who we are. By accepting these flaws, we have the ability to turn them into strengths, especially for the benefit of helping others in need. And that's one of my favorite messages of Final Fantasy IX. Rama said it best: the people in the story had flaws. That's why they became heroes in the people's minds. I look at each Final Fantasy game in this same fashion. I know there are flaws, but I don't care. I wanted to do these reflection videos to express my passion and love for the entire series. A series that has stuck with me since I was too young to hold a controller. With hope that each game will be appreciated, the same way that Final Fantasy IX has risen up to greatness in the eyes of the fanbase. I can't tell you how much Final Fantasy means to me, but I can do my best. The 9th installment is a fairy tale for everyone. A game that can not only intrigue a long-time fan of the series, but even young nieces and nephews that should be asleep. A game that overcame death with an overwhelming will to live. What once was forgotten, now one of the greatest fantasies ever told.